Hi YouTube, my name's Joel and this is my first YouTube video. This is a response to a video that Matt Dillahunty posted. The video is a debate between Matt and JT Eberhardt versus John Miraval and Mark Miraval at the University of Kansas, and the topic was, is God necessary for morality? That may not have been the exact title, but the Miravals were presenting a theistic view that claimed that some sort of theistic beliefs were a necessary foundation for morality. And Matt and JT were presenting not an atheist viewpoint, but a secular viewpoint, one that does not depend on the existence of God. I thought Matt and JT did an excellent job. They presented pretty much things that I believe to be true. So this video is not intended as a criticism of the way they presented their argument. Matt's closing statement especially I thought was especially important. The Miravals sort of attacked atheism as a system of belief and as a basis for belief, and Matt made it very clear that a secular moral system actually has nothing to do with the existence of gods. In fact, even if you are a theist and you believe that there is a god or are gods, that's not a necessary basis, that's not a sufficient basis for morality. If there are authoritative moral pronouncements being made, you still have to use your reasoning in your moral sense to determine what is moral. So that's all great. I did, however, think that the theists presented their side well, and I'd like to try and distill their argument down to premises and a conclusion, and try and see maybe a different line of inquiry into some of those premises to see where we might come up with a different conclusion. So it's not my intent at all to misrepresent the theist argument. If you think that I'm leaving something important out in the way that I'm distilling the argument, please say so in the comments, because I'd like to present their argument as accurately as I can. Okay, so this is what I have for the theistic side. 1. We have moral knowledge and morality exists. 2. Morality cannot properly be based on the preferences of human beings or groups of human beings, or on empiricism or reasoning. 3. A secular point of view is not sufficient to account for the existence of morality without those things. 4. It is reasonable to believe in a moral God. 5. Such a God would be a satisfactory basis for human morality. And 6. Since we have morality, we can be justified in believing in such a God and believing that it is the source of morality. I do think this argument is compelling and may have convinced me before I really started studying religion in the way that I have. So I'd like to propose a thought experiment that I think addresses a couple of these premises at some of its core points and shows how we can come up with a different conclusion. What I'd like to avoid is the discussion of something from nothing and the first cause that inevitably gets brought up by theists in any kind of debate relating to God, because that's not at all what the secular position in this debate rests on. We don't, as Matt said, it doesn't actually matter whether or not there are gods for this point of view. So I'd like to propose a thought experiment that I think both the theists and atheists could agree upon as a basis for as a basis for investigation. So we suppose there is a deist God, a disinterested physicist God, and this God supplies the necessary matter, energy, and order for the Big Bang. Okay, and then the Big Bang happens, okay, as supplied by this prime mover. And then everything sort of proceeds in a similar fashion to how you would expect by physics. Okay, so physicists can account for the emergence of order from chaos, in contradiction to what the Miravals said in their presentation. In particular, the expansion of the universe is what allows for pockets of order to emerge. Okay, and this is a mathematically sound principle. This is a scientifically sound principle. This is not a controversial subject. So stars can emerge, for example, and stars can output massive amounts of energy over billions of years, and then as that energy is entering other localized systems, such as a planet, that can cause ordered systems to emerge, and order will emerge in those systems. There's no scientific contradiction there. Okay, and JT sort of explained something like that there's no scientific contradiction to order emerging on Earth in any way. Okay, so then all we need are a few little things that are scientifically very plausible, and the theistic side, fortunately, didn't seem to be denying science's ability to explain natural phenomena. And I think that it sounded like they would agree that evolution is something that has happened on Earth. So we need a self-replicating molecule to emerge. It can be a much simpler one than the kinds of amino acids and proteins that theists often they cite the absurdity of such a thing assembling itself, or a cell assembling itself. But we know that it can be based on something simpler. Any kind of molecule that can cause a replica of itself through purely physical interactions to appear in its environment. That's all we need for evolution to get started, and then the mechanisms of evolution are very well understood. And we move forward with evolution, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same on Earth, because perhaps we live in a moral universe, so maybe it couldn't turn out the way that it does here. But something is going to happen. Evolution is going to take place, because evolution always takes place in an environment with self-replicating objects that has some constraint, some exterior constraint on those objects, something that could allow for some of those to perform better than others. Okay, so some more complex. If there's an advantage in replication for complexity, if coming together, if molecules coming together to assemble something resembling a cell is advantageous, then that'll happen. Okay, so in our amoral universe kicked off by our deistic God, we can start to have more complex life forms. There's nothing that should preclude such an outcome. And eventually, instead of maybe parts assembling into a larger organism, it could be the case that multiple organisms, okay, behave in such a manner that through something similar to cooperation, but without any moral implications, that this would emerge, okay, that without becoming the same organism, maintaining their distinctness, they still have advantage over organisms acting individually. Okay, and then we just keep going, and eventually the behavior of these organisms becomes so complex that they behave in such a manner to indicate awareness of their surroundings. Okay, we don't have to posit the existence of consciousness. We just have to posit that they act in such a way that they say they are conscious. Okay, now they've developed language. Okay, and they have the behavior of consciousness. Okay, and then they also have cooperation. And without even knowing what the reasons are, they behave in a social manner, okay, in a manner that would be recognizable to us as moral beings as social behavior. Okay, and then we get to the point where they're actually able to be self-aware about their social behavior, and they decide to have a debate about it. Okay, so we acknowledge that in this universe there are complex organisms. These complex organisms have the capacity to discuss their social and antisocial behavior. Okay, they've through just pure evolutionary processes and social development, they've developed rules for social behavior. And they enforce those rules. Okay, if one organism acts in an antisocial manner, then they're somehow punished or perhaps even excluded from society. And on the other hand, pro-social behavior is rewarded because evolution has favored such an outcome. Because pro-social behavior leads to greater cooperation, leads to competitive benefit for the group, etc. Okay, so now our complex organisms sit down to have a debate. And one side of the debate feels that the story that has been told, that I just told, that maybe scientists within their group has come up with, is insufficient to explain their feelings of social behavior. They feel that they're not just doing it because it's advantageous. They feel that they're not just doing it because it feels like the right thing to do. They feel that their feelings of this being the correct way to behave indicates a greater truth of this being correct behavior. And then the other side is maybe presenting this evolutionary view that I've just laid out, and says that it's just they act this way because it's beneficial, and that they should develop new ways to improve their pro-social behavior and and to discourage antisocial behavior. So it's clear what's going on here. I think that something very close to this is actually represents our universe. But the key thing is we can agree that, or hopefully we can agree that that in our thought experiment, the theistic side there is wrong. They're incorrect. There does not exist a moral God in their universe, and a moral God is not necessary to explain the development, to explain how they got where they are. Okay, so there's a difference between whether the moral God is necessary to give them a basis for their moral feelings. A moral God is not necessary to explain how things came to be as they were. It's not necessary to explain the emergence of social behavior. It's not necessary to emerge their feelings that they should engage in pro-social behavior, because those feelings are a natural consequence of the fact that those behaviors emerged. It may be necessary for them to posit a moral God in order to give them a sufficient rational justification for those feelings representing a greater truth. But all that means is that they're wrong. It means that there is no greater moral truth. There's only the moral truth on the level of what actually exists, on the level of the behaviors that work for their society and that have led to them having the kind of success that they've had so far. And I think that's the core problem with the theist argument in our universe as well. Because I think there is no substantive, measurable difference between the universe that I've proposed and the one that exists in reality. And that means that if you posit a moral system that is necessary, that a God is necessary to explain, then you can't reach any conclusions about the existence of God based on that. It may be that you're simply describing an impossible moral system. And I think that when theists talk about things like absolute morality or even moral truth exterior to human experience, then they're just simply describing something that's impossible. And after that, if you convince them of such a viewpoint, they'll sort of appeal to consequences and say, and point to, as they did in the debate that I just watched, talk about communist societies and sort of the inherent evils in different ways of structuring society. And I just don't think that matters at all to the discussion at hand. Especially since I think both sides agree that we should have morality. And then if we get together people that agree that we should have morality, then it doesn't really matter what happens if we don't have morality, because we do have it. We've agreed to have it. And these are all, now we're just sort of getting back into points that I think anyone from the secular position would state. So I don't think I need to go too deep into it. I think that pretty much covers it. I would just like to hear what a theist would say about this. I'm not sure whether they would either say that such a society would not emerge in a deistic universe. I don't think that's justified. I think there are lots of evolutionary reasons for social behavior to emerge. And I think that then that social behavior would instill feelings of morality within the people or the beings that engage in it. So I don't think that's a valid criticism. But I don't see where to go past that. Once we're in this society that's having this debate, we have to acknowledge. Perhaps they would say that the theists in this universe are justified in believing in a God because that belief allows them to have a basis for their morality. And that's probably the best answer that allows them to continue to hold their side. But that answer I cannot accept, because then they're asserting that they should believe something false in order to get a better outcome. And I'm sort of with Matt on this one. I don't think that holding a false belief can possibly lead to better outcomes in general. There may be you could concoct a specific scenario where you get a better outcome, but for every scenario where you get a better outcome, there are going to be some where you get a worse outcome. And furthermore, I think the other side in our deistic world of the debate, I think they're entirely justified in attempting to promote and give a solid basis for the social behavior that they observe and that gives them pleasure and that gives them happiness and to discourage the behavior that they see causes suffering. And I see no reason why you should tell them that their reasons are insufficient, because clearly, at least in the thought experiment, our scientific side or our secular side, they're entirely correct. And so to just tell them that they should, that even though they're right, they should either give up and throw up their hands as society devolves into chaos, or accept a false proposition. There's no reason to do that. So I'm interested to hear what people have to say in response to this. Maybe I've missed something obvious, or maybe I went too far in drawing conclusions from the premises of my thought experiment. Okay, thank you.